Hi everyone, welcome to another Thursday craft here at the Tulare Public Library. I am Brittany and I am so excited to be here with you. For the adult craft in November, we will be learning how to make a bowl with yarn and a paper plate. So this craft is technically called bowl weaving. I did find it on the Los Angeles County Library page, and I have seen it in some craft blogs apart from that. So I'm not sure who original credit belongs to, but I'm so excited to be doing this today. I have to say that once I started doing this craft, doing all of my practice rounds, I realized that it was very soothing, a lot more calming than I anticipated. So I think it's a really nice craft for this time of year with everything going on. So I wanted to show you just what our end result is going to look like. So using this paper plate, we are going to be creating a paper bowl and using our yarn colors to weave those together. We'll talk about this more at the end, but I am going to be using mine for key storage. I do have a bit of a bad habit of misplacing my keys. So all I did to create the picture to indicate what goes inside my bowl was to take 2 keys off of my key ring, trace them with a pen, and then color them in a little. If you wanted to create yours for miscellaneous loose items around the house, office supplies, you could write that inside, you could draw that inside. So it's kind of fun how customizable it ends up being. But this is our overall finished product, and I'm going to show you how to start. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move this so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Now, we were able to give out craft supply bags at the library for this craft. So if you were able to pick one of those up, they included 7 different bobbins of yarn here, 7 different colors. And they included a pre-cut paper plate. I hope I didn't steal any of the fun away from any of you by doing that, but I needed the practice to figure out exactly what the right dimensions were. So, but today I am going to be showing you how to cut the plate from scratch in case we have anyone joining and watching the craft who didn't get a craft supply bag. So let's go ahead and get started. So the main thing to remember about this craft is you need to have an odd number of panels for your paper plate. By panel, I mean the little pieces that are cut and folded up to create a bowl. So I have 9 panels here on this one that I've already created. Again, you could do 7, you could do 11, as long as it's an odd number. What happens when it's an even number is that as you weave in the round, only half of your panels end up being covered. So really important odd number. So here I just drew 9 little marks of which I'm going to cut so that I have my 9 panels here. So that's my first step. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my scissors. And again, if you've got a craft bag, you won't need these. Thanks for hanging with us. I'm going to cut from the edge of the paper plate to the inner circle. If you'll notice, the inner circle is this place that sits flatly on the table, and then it kind of slants up into the ridges. So I'm going to start at the edge and cut in to the inner circle. I'm just going to be doing that all the way around on my 9 marks. Now, what we're going to do after this is create a little bit of space between each of those panels, because as you build your bowl up, you want space for the yarn to sit evenly without any of the edges getting warped or puckered. And I will definitely show you more what I mean by that. All right, so I've got my 9 cuts. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a rectangle of space around each of these panels. If you notice, if I fold these up to create a bowl shape, there's overlap between these 2 panels. I want it so that when I fold the bowl up, there's a gap of space between each of those. So what I'm gonna do is use these little indentations on the paper plate. I'm gonna cut 1 around the line I just cut and 1 on the other side. So now what I get is this, and this is what I want. So I'm just gonna go around creating these spaces between each of my 9 panels, and then we'll go ahead and remove those, and then I'll show you what to look for. I will have to say that I had to do this a couple of different times to figure out exactly what the right spacing was, but the great thing is if you need to adjust, that's totally okay. and just one more here. Okay, so now I'm going to bend all of these down. Eventually, we do want to cut these away. And I know it's a little hard to see right now. I'll go ahead and lift it up once I'm done with this portion. Okay, so now I have what looks like almost a sun, where you can see these really clear cuts between each of them. So now all I'm going to do is use my scissors to cut away those little strips that I've just cut out. Go ahead and do that. And then if you count, you will notice I have 9 different, I'm going to call them little sun rays, 9 different little sun rays, which is good because, again, we want an odd number of panels. And then the last thing I want to do to test this is make sure, again, that when I fold these up so that they're now in a bowl shape, that there's no overlap between the pieces. So to do that, all I'm going to do is use my fingers and fold each of these little sun rays in. Whoop. Slipper little things. And then I'm going to take a look at these. So once I have them kind of folded up, what I'm going to do is look down. So you're almost looking down like this. And as they're folded, I just want to make sure that none of the pieces are overlapping. So I see that these pieces are almost overlapping. They're a little bit close. So all I'm going to do is start at the top and cut down towards the center of the plate. And I'm just going to cut at a slant so that there is less of an angle and more of like a parallel, that's what I'm trying to say, more of a parallel cut between the two, so that when they bend up, there truly is a nice gap of space and they're not overlapping. And again, this just really helps with your project not getting warped. So I'm going to face this towards me so that I can really see which of these are coming in towards each other. And then I think we will be good to start. So again, you'll notice if some of these are kind of almost touching, then you want to create more of a rectangle. So I'm just going to use my scissors here and almost cut parallel so that this bottom edge lines up with this edge. Hope that's pretty clear. So I'm just going to do this and this. And then if you look at this edge again, you'll see that these are parallel to one another and they're not collapsing in on each other. All right, so I hope that is pretty clear. And again, I had to trim mine a couple of times once we got started. Hopefully all the ones in the craft bags ended up pretty straight and even since I was eyeballing all of those. Okay. And then I think this is going to be good. All right, and then just one more here. Perfect. All right, so I've got all of my little pieces snipped away. Let me get these out of the way. And again, you'll notice, so if this is my paper plate, then I've got an odd number of panels and I've got a nice space between each one. So now I'm gonna set this down the way that I will be handling it as I'm working on it. So paper plate flat with panels flipped up towards you so it's a bowl facing up. All right, so I included 7 little bobbins of yarn in this craft. I measured it out so that really we only need 6 to cover the bottom to the top of the bowl. But I wanted to throw an extra one in there so everyone has the ability to choose what colors they want. Let me see how we can see these best. What colors they want. We've got some cool colors, some warm colors, some bright colors, some neutral colors. So feel free to stack these however you want. You can do dark to light and create an ombre effect. You could do the other way, light to dark and do an ombre. You can really mix and match the way that you want. So I think that I am going to start with my green. Just gonna start here. All right, so the way that you're gonna do this, for each row of yarn that you tie or that you start, you're gonna tie it onto one of the panels. It doesn't matter which. And the way that I found that's easiest to do this, I'm going to do this on the one closest to the camera, so hopefully you can see, is I'm just going to create a loop around one of my panels. So you'll see I have my yarn end here and my end right here. And you maybe want like an inch of space just so you have some space to work. Now I'm gonna loop it, pull the end through, and then I'm gonna tie my knot right on the edge here. So I find this is the easiest way because you can see what you're doing. You can create enough slack and it's easy to maneuver between the panels here. So I'm just gonna do a regular knot. So I'm just gonna tie it once and then tie it twice, bringing my short end through the loop. All right, now you can always trim off the long edges, which I will do here just to make it look a little neater and tidier. All right, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna situate the knot to one side of the panel, and then I'm gonna start weaving on the panel right next to that knot. So the way that we're gonna do this is you are going to go in and out, meaning in front of, behind, in front of, behind. So you'll notice here's my knot. I'm gonna choose to go in front, and in front means closest to the center. And then I'm gonna go behind, and then I'm gonna come in front, and then I'm gonna go behind. In front, behind, in front, behind. Now, because this is an odd number of panels, what you'll notice is as you go in the circle, it will automatically, so like I have two in front right here and one behind here. You'll automatically, as long as you're doing one in front, one behind, start weaving up the bowl so that every panel is covered. Now, I've measured out the yarn so that on each side that you look at, whether it's the inside or the front or the outside or the back, there will be enough yarn of each color to have 3 strands stacked. I thought that was a nice way to just get a sense of each color, but also create space for plenty of multicolored yarn here. So I'm just gonna keep this up, behind, in front of, behind, in front of. And I'm gonna keep an eye out. When I start to notice 3 strands covering each panel, then that'll probably be time for me to tie off. And because I've tried to measure this out quite carefully, you'll probably tend to start running out at that point anyway, so hopefully it ends up being a good measurement. Okay, so all I'm doing is behind, in front of, behind. Now, the one thing I've noticed with this craft to be really mindful of is that you want like a fairly loose tension for the yarn. I've noticed that if I am making things, and okay, now here is the point where I've got 3 strands here, my next has 3, my next has 3, my next has 3. So I've got even coverage here. So I am ready to tie this part off. But to finish my last thought really quickly, what you want to do is have a fairly loose tension on this. If you're pulling really tight, then what'll happen as you start to build up your bowl is it'll start to pucker and get warped and kind of fold in on itself. So you want a nice loose tension so that the plate is covered, but it creates a nice bowl shape. So let's keep that in mind, especially as we build up. The first layer of yarn can be, fairly tight because you're trying to create that structure. But as we go on, we will just be mindful of that. So again, I have my yarn. I'm going to tie it off here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it just the way that I tied it on. So I've got my tail here. What I'm going to do is loop it around the, what was I calling these? Oh my goodness me. I'm going to loop it around the panel that I just came from. So this one's in front on this panel. I'm gonna loop it around on the same one. And then using the loose end of my tail, I'm just gonna knot it so that the knot is on the very side of the panel here. I know it's a little hard to see, but I just wanna do it correctly here. And this doesn't have to be perfect. Once you get your entire bowl done, you can tuck the loose ends under the existing yarn. So for now, it's just kind of to get it tied off. All right, so you'll see my little knot there, and then I'm just gonna snip this so that I've got a nice neat edge there. All right, so let's choose. So I've got my green, I think next I'm gonna do this beautiful spotted brown. And for those of us that didn't get the craft bag, an estimate of how long each of these bobbins are is probably 8 to 9 feet. Again, you don't have to use that much. You can use more. If you're getting scrap yarn, that's about how much I used here. But again, you can kind of test it as you go. For those of you that got yarn in your craft supply bags, they all should be tied off like this, but all you do is find the loose end and it's just tucked under there, and then you should be able to unwind the whole thing. So hopefully that was straightforward enough. All right, so now I'm gonna find my next edge, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did. I'm gonna knot it on one of the panels, and I'm gonna start moving around. So you'll see this is where I knotted off my green. I'm just gonna move on to the very next panel and knot my brown yarn there. You can technically start anywhere you want, but just to keep track of where I am and make sure everything's even, that's how I'm gonna do it. So again, I'm just creating a loop around this paper plate panel. I have my yarn end to the right because I'm right-handed, and I have my little end, and I'm just gonna tie it around once. And when you're tying on these yarn pieces initially, same kind of rule of tension goes. You want it to be taut enough to hold and not slip off, but you don't want it to be so tight that it's warping or folding the paper plate. Oh my goodness, the paper plate piece. That is a tongue twister. All right, so we've got it here. And again, I can go ahead and snip off my long tail just to make it look a little neater. So here I am again. I've got my knotted. I'm gonna go behind in front, behind in front. Now, this is a great instance or a great time that we can start working with the tension of this. So really, I want this to be fairly loose. As I'm working the bowl up, I want to make sure that the panels are facing up because I want to be winding the yarn around the shape that I want it to keep. But you'll notice, the minute I start pulling it too tight, let me go ahead and show you from the top. The minute I start pulling it too tight, you see things start to buckle, start to kind of unevenly fold in. So I really do not want to put any pressure on this. I just want it to keep it nice and loose and easy breezy. So whatever method you come across to be able to wind it in and out works. I'm just keeping mine on the table and moving the paper plate and using my fingers to guide the yarn in and out, in and out. You'll see it's coming along with our second layer, in and out, behind, in front of. And now, if I start to feel that there is a little bit too much tension in my bowl, that things are kind of getting out of shape, what I can do is put my hands inside the center and with my fingers kind of put really light pressure on the panels and kind of shape them outward so that more, so that I feel like my bowl has a little bit more, it's a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Out like this as opposed to coming in like this. And then that way, as I build it up, I can use my tension to make sure that everything is even as opposed to having to continue to loosen it up. So I'm just gonna go round and round. And then again, because of the way I've measured it out for everything in the craft bags, you should start to notice that your yarn will cover about 3 strands high on both the inside and the outside. We're at 2 right now. So I'm just going to keep going around until I've got my 3 strands here. All right. All right, so now I've gotten to the point where I'm out of yarn. It looks like I have 3 strands. What I want to do here, because this is the second row, is I'm just going to gently push the yarn down so that I'm essentially getting rid of any gaps between the first and the second color. That way it'll look like a nice tightly wound bowl. I don't have any strange gaps and everything looks really uniform. All right, so I have my tail here. Here is the last panel that my yarn is on. I'm gonna loop it around the back of that same panel and then I'm gonna tuck it in the back. Again, it's better to knot it, but just so that I can get through the display of all of these, I'm just gonna tuck mine for now and I can go back and tie them later. And let me tuck it one more time because that kind of flew out there. All right. All right, there we go. So there we go. So now I'm gonna do, I think I'm gonna do like a nice, I'm gonna do a nice bright color. Why not? So I've got my peach or my bright pink here. Again, I'm gonna untie the tail, being careful not to create any knots, which I accidentally just did then. All right, so I've got my peach color. All right, so this is where I knotted off my last color. I'm just gonna move one to the right and create my tie there. So again, I'm just looping the yarn onto one panel. I've got my ball end and I've got my, my loose end, and I'm just gonna do a knot, keeping it taut, but not too tight. And I'm just gonna scooch that little knot to the very edge, to the very side of my panel so that it's between this one and the next one. All right, nice and taut, but not too tight. And then I'm gonna trim it. And then I'm gonna get started like the last. So I'm gonna do behind and front, behind and front, behind and front. Now, when I was doing my practice runs, I tended to notice that probably about the third color is when you really start to have to pay attention about the tightness of the yarn or the tension, because if it's too tight, it'll really kind of start to buckle at this phase. But if you're keeping it nice and loose, then you should just see it building up with everything looking pretty equidistant. So again, I'm gonna use that trick where I just stick my palms inside and kind of with very light pressure, I'm gonna kind of push the panels out just to make sure everything is looking pretty equidistant, and I'm not getting any puckering or crazy imbalances in how I'm putting this together. I will say, I think there is something very soothing about doing a semi-repetitive task like this, especially when you see something beautiful come out of the other side of it. I hope those of you following along are feeling the same. All right, so I'm keeping an eye out because I have 2 strands of yarn in most of these places. You'll notice here I have 3 and here I have 2. So I'm just going around until they all have 3, at which point I can tie off. And I'm getting close to the end of my yarn, so I'm guessing this will hopefully, well, look at that, and it'll work just right. So again, before I tie this yarn off, I'm gonna kind of give it a little bit of a pull and push just to make sure everything seems to be coming across evenly. So this is the last panel. Once again, this is the last panel that I'm coming across. I'm gonna use my yarn tail, loop it around the same one. And in this case, normally you would tie it, but in this case, I'm just gonna tuck it just so that I don't spend a lot of time since we're trying to get through the whole thing. But again, you would tie it just as you tied on, creating the knot to the side there, I find is the easiest. All right, so now I'm gonna get a little crazy with my colors. I think I'm gonna do this beautiful, we have this brown and blue variegated, I believe is the word. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this because I think a cool color, which is blue, next to a warm color or hot color, which is usually red, orange, yellow, but this variation of pink, I think is a really nice way to create beautiful contrast. So I tied my last one off here. I'm just gonna move to the right and tie, again, I've got my yarn, I've got my tail end and I've got my bobbin end. I'm just gonna loop it around one panel, create a little knot on the edge here, taut but not so tight it's warping anything. Just a singular little knot here. I'm gonna pull it to the edge between the 2 panels. I'm gonna snip off my excess, and I see that I tucked a little excess down here. So I'm gonna snip that off and make that clean while we're here. All right, and then I'm just doing what I've done before. So here, I'm gonna go inside, outside, in, out, back, front. And I hope it's really clear. So if I'm on the back of this one, then I'm tucking it in between the panels. I'm doing it in front, I'm tucking between the panels, I'm doing behind, tucking between the panels, doing in front, tucking between the panels, doing behind. In front, panels, behind. All right. So this one, I think I'm gonna have to adjust a little bit because again, I think I might be doing it a bit too tight. And I see it kind of getting a little warped, so fully untie here. So again, I'm just gonna stick my palms in my bowl using gentle pressure, just kind of loosen up the last row of yarn that I've been using. If you find that the yarn is getting snagged between your paper plate panels and preventing you from kind of loosening that up, you can always take your working yarn and kind of wiggle it between the spaces to make sure that it's not getting snagged and to give you the tension and the pressure that you're looking for. So I'm going to keep going around, same pattern, behind and front, behind and front. I'm going to be looking for. And the other thing you can do, I noticed that it seemed this panel was sitting a lot lower than the one next to it. So you can just grab the top of the panel and kind of pull it in and shake it up. That way, if any of them are starting to really dip below the line, you can get a little bit more surface area to work with there. So that's a handy trick too. To make sure everything is working out evenly. All right, so I've got about, just gonna pull this one up a little bit so I have more working space, this one. And then it looks like I'm getting to about the end here where I've got 3 lines of yarn. All right, I'm just gonna pull some of these up that have kind of slouched down. And there we go, I'm at 3. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna do, this looks pretty straight. It looks like everything has kind of been woven pretty evenly, but I'm just gonna put my palm in the middle, hold it against the table, kind of pull up these panels to make sure everything looks fairly even. I'm also going to use my fingers to push the yarn down to make sure there's no major gaps, to make it look nice and stacked. And then lastly, I'm going to do my trick again where I'm putting my palms in the center, just gently pushing outwards so that everything looks fairly even. All right, so now I'm going to tie this off. So this is the last panel that I was using. I'm just going to loop my yarn tail around that same one and then tie it off here. And for my purposes, again, I'm just going to tuck mine, but you can go ahead and tie it off so that it stays quite firmly. All right, and I have a little bit of space. So for these paper plate bowls, you can leave a little bit of the paneling on top. Hopefully it'll contrast nicely with the colors we have so far, or you can build the yarn up all the way to the edge. So I don't think this is gonna take me 3 rows, but I'm just gonna do a nice border of this pinkish purple here. So I tied off, let's see, it looks like right here. So I'm just going to use the one to the right, tie a quick purple loop to this nice bright flash of color. So I'm just going to tie 1, and then with my tail end 2, just a regular knot here, tighten a little bit, snip the end so it's not overhanging, and then I'm just going to do 1 or 2 more rows. So again, in front of behind, hopefully everyone's feeling comfortable with this in front of behind, getting the flow of it, feeling like you're in your crafting zone. And I'm just gonna do maybe about 2, just to get this nice color at the top here. All right, and actually I'm just gonna go around once because it looks like my paper plates are sort of kind of dipping low enough that it looks like I have most of it covered. So I'm gonna go ahead and snip this off. Again, normally you would tie it, I'm just gonna tuck it for now. But you'll notice if you now look, again, I need to trim off some of my loose ends, but you'll see this beautiful gradation of all the different colors of yarn we've chosen, stacked nicely. And then if you look inside, it's the same thing. I hope these beautiful colors are coming out, where you just have these row upon row of these beautiful colors. And again, if I wanted to let me grab my Sharpie over here. If I wanted to draw pictures of keys, if I wanted to do, you know, loose items in my kitchen, in my junk drawer, I could do that. I'm actually keeping this bowl for my office here at work. So I'm going to just write in here, office supplies. I could have a little snack bowl, and I'm realizing this is probably going to show up backwards for you all, but know that it says office supplies. So that is our bowl weaving. I hope you all enjoyed as much as I did. I would absolutely love to see your creations. So if you follow us on Facebook, be sure to post what you've created and what you've used it for. And please come back for our December adult craft. We will be making a felt holly wreath, and we will once again have craft supply bags available. We'll have a limited amount available, so you can just come see us at Card Services, and those will be ready 1 week before the craft. So those will be ready the second Thursday of December, ready for our craft on the third Thursday of December. So thank you all again. I always appreciate when you craft with me, and I really look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.